Hello, I'm Super Orange Cat here, and today with my quick review of the final episode of Fena Pirate Princess episode 12. Now, what I like doing is start with some of the things I liked about this episode and some things I didn't like about this episode and tie it up with a big old bow at the end of the episode. I'm going to be a little different this case because a lot happened in this episode, a lot to take in, and honestly, most of it was pretty damn bad. So, I'm just going to start. This is going to end up being a rant, by the way. This is going to be a very unstructured rant today. I watched like an hour or two ago, took a little time to kind of process it, and I'm ready to shoot out with some of my results. So, again, I said at the end, one of my last couple of videos, I'm worried about the ending of this show. It's going to turn into some weird, none of this really mattered at all type scenario. That's exactly what happens, yes. You have this thing where the observer, because Cody's just like one of his personas, was like, oh, by the way, Fena, we made the choices for you. So, by the way, since we did all the choices for you, you're an 18-year-old girl, you've really done nothing for yourself. All the people that surround you has kind of helped you out and done everything for you at this point. So, want to decide the fate of the Earth, sweetie? That's basically what it felt like to me. And it's like, okay, option A, everything happens normally. Option B, Revelation happens. Basically, Armageddon happens. And it's going to end like Revelation, where it's like you, Yukimaru, and eventually maybe some pure souls to get to the Earth, because that's what the Maiden's choice is. And that's a whole nother MacGuffin of shit. The whole Maiden shit is basically the Avatar, but with even more convoluting rules. The Avatar, like, of course, from Avatar: The Last Airbender, where it's like this, like, ephemeral spirit that chooses young people, and they're supposed to be the peacemakers to keep peace between the four nations. But, like, this time it's like, oh yeah, you're the specific role where you're gonna be, like, pure and perfect, and you can't have sex at a certain point to be a virgin or to be a maiden at this point, and you get to choose whether or not humanity deserves to still exist. And I guess to this point, they always chose, yeah, keep humanity going. But like, oh, by the way, if you do this, you have to have a kid, and one has to be female because that's kind of whole important to the whole maiden thing. But like, you can't have a kid now because you're a maiden, so it's very important you're a virgin now. But like later, have kids, like knock one out of the park, sweetheart. That's basically what it felt like to me. It kind of got weird. And honestly, this whole thing where it's like things will proceed as they normally would, and she sees visions of like her friends dying, and it's like, well, no shit, they're gonna die. It's like you're living life. You're going to eventually die. Why would the fact that your friends die, shock you like that? It made no sense to me. And I think she got goaded into thinking it would immediately happen, but the other one involves everyone getting nuked off the planet, so she chooses, oh, the one where everyone's happy and joyous. And oh my god, how they did this ending was so bullshit to me. Okay, so everyone counts Fena for some stupid reason. And yes, Evangelion reference right there, because again, we're going into religious territory, so like I guess since any anime talks about religion has to inevitably be filled with Evangelion references from here on out, which is unsurprisingly what they ended up doing here. So that at this point, you're stuck with, and it's like you have this thing where like all the possible good case scenarios all happened. It's like this sunshiny day shit where like half of the Rumble Rose crew we see right there being alive. Fortunately, one of them is my beloved Charlotte. We also see Anya, who is the pirate with the eye patch that a lot of people went to, and of course Mary, the dumb one who's in love with one of the Goblin twins. And also you had this weird shit where they imply both Abel and Helena got reincarnated as kids or some shit. And it's just there, and they just run right by. And they put attention to them, like, oh, those are the two people we saw earlier in the show. And by the way, way to unwrite that ending. Abel's plot was honestly, a lot of people shit on it. I thought it was a good plot. I love how they ended his plot. And they decided, do it, Deus Ex Machina. Fuck that. We're just gonna rewrite that shit. They're kids again. Which has become its own weird little creepy trope of, oh, these characters died, just reincarnate them. Oh, but like reincarnate them as 8-year-olds. Which, I mean, shit. It's like, it makes me think, did Production IG decide, you know what, let's not do the last episode, let's let Cloverworks finish it? because if there is nothing more Cloverworks than having a good show or a decent premise fucked up by an ending in 2021. That's the most Cloverworks thing possible. Read Wonder Egg Priority, or you can argue Promise Neverland Season 2, but Promise Neverland Season 2 was already coming off the rails pretty damn fast in that season. The last episode was just more. It's like the final shitting the bed you do after you die, because apparently you shit yourself after you die. That's what the Promise Neverland Season 2 was. In this episode, holy shit of the. And that's the thing. I looked online after I watched it, and I formed my opinions to see what other people's opinions were. I'm surprised at how many people had similar opinions to me about this. Because usually, honestly, if there's any difference, I rode with the show a little longer. A lot of people, there are people who are like, I don't like where the show's going, like kind of halfway through the season. I stuck through this to the end. Like, this show, I still thought, I kind of like the whole Eden concept to it. But then they turn it into this whole Fena is Jesus, her mother's Jesus. Well, her mother's only kind of Jesus because like she had a kid and she like ran off, so she couldn't be a maiden. But like it's lineal, and like Joan of Arc was one of these maidens because it was a very important concept, and it's a very important concept in French lore. Specifically, that Joan of Arc, when she led the armies of France against Britain or England in the Hundred Years' War, that she was specifically a virgin. And that's like a weird fixation a lot of people French people kind of have because she's like one of their big national symbols. And who is that guy? That Norman something guy who wrote Empress Teresa. He had this fixation too on Joan of Arc about her being a virgin. So he kept comparing Empress Teresa to Joan of Arc. And like, if you've never heard of Empress Teresa, just look that up on the internet. You are going to have a fun afternoon looking that shit up. And that's what it reminded me to. The more they kept talking about, like, Jean de Buzel de Arc, no, my love. It's like, you're related to this person. Joan of Arc is female Jesus. In fact, we're kind of God because the maiden gets to choose the concept of whether Earth dies or not. So, like, the maidens are actually become God, but unlike any lore where, like, God is some weird constant, God is something that changes, like, the Avatar. At least in Avatar Last Airbender, the Avatar wasn't the end all be all because there were, like, high level spirits who were still doing shit. That was implied that ultimately they had say over the avatars. This just was like a stupid, broken, world-bending system they did, and it really felt. And I feel like it was just them being like, "Oh crap! Can we just rush all this shit in one episode? Let's just try." And again, feels horrible. It feels stinted on a good day. And I could go all day about how the whole Maiden system doesn't even hold up to interior criticism. It doesn't have interior logic whatsoever. But again, just disappointing episode. This episode is like a 1 out of 10 for me. I guess the one is in the fact that Charlotte's still alive. That's such a petty reason. That's a petty reason to even give it a point, in my opinion. But I'm just going to give it a point because I feel like an asshole if I gave this a 0 out of 10 or anything like that. Because, again, and also another thing, this just proves that there's going to be a second season. By the way, there's not going to be a second season of this. They're like goading on to like, next week is a season 1 marathon. That means there's going to be season 2. Look, you don't do that ending where you show like, this is what the characters do afterwards without it being like, yeah, this is how we're going to end everything. This is how we're gonna everything. She's an amnesiac now. She doesn't remember anything. But that makes no sense too because the mother never had to make that choice. Because right before she got burned at the stake, we have a scene where she remembers Abel from her childhood and simultaneously knows about Eden because she tells him, I will see you in Eden. So the mother never had to do that choice where she had to forget her memory. And the reason the excuse for giving the memories like, you can't handle it because you have a human heart, but you're like female Jesus, so that shouldn't matter. What the hell's going on here? I feel like they're just trying to throw shit at the wall, like pretend like it makes sense and hope people get along with it. But I'm looking online, no one fell for it. Everyone hates this ending. That's the thing. This show, at least the first 6 to 8 episodes, had gained a lot of goodwill from people, even outside of Toonami. I think I saw some ranking system of some like anime rankings, like the top anime of fall 2021. Early on, Fena was like top 5. This is out of like what 40 or 50 anime are technically produced each season in Japan. That's my praise to be like that high. I think it ended outside the top 20. Like it just started falling and falling and falling and falling, and it just ends with a thud right on the ground. And that might be a beautiful way to cap off anime in 2021 if you think about it. A show with a good idea, a show with a good concept, with some decent execution, ending flat on its face. And I'm just looking ahead at Toonami. In a few weeks, on November 13th, we will get Blade Runner Black Lotus on the block. And I'm already less amped for it than I was when Fena started. When Fena started, I'm like, this is amazing animation. That's one thing at least it still had. Animation was top tier 10 out of 10 the whole time. And I might end up doing a video later on, me recounting my overall arcing opinion on Fena Pirate Princess. And I said before, like, this episode, I'm probably giving this an 8.5 or 9 out of 10. It fell a bit. The thing is, since a lot didn't necessarily kill my enjoyment of the show to this point, it would only knock it down to probably like a 7 out of 10, which would probably put it on par with something like Fully Cooley Alternative for me. And another thing, but again, we get Blade Runner Black Lotus in a few weeks. Animation for that looks like hot shit. It looks like source filmmaker stuff. But again, I'm not that amped for it. Some of you are amped for it. I don't think it's going to be nearly as good as the first 10 or 11 episodes of Phantom Pirate Princess were for me. But what do you guys think, man? Leave your comments, leave your opinions down below. I appreciate your input. And if there's one thing to take away from Phantom Pirate Princess, one thing from this episode that I have to point to and say, hey, not that bad. At the very least, it was not the biggest misfire this week. I am super that is all.